Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. We're going to talk Blade Runner, because I've had a lot of comments, positive feedback about the various Blade Runner videos I've done. Talked about the bottle, the glass, talked about the PC game not too long ago. So I thought, okay, let me do some more Blade Runner content. What can I do? I know, why don't I talk about the first film? Kind of a review, but a lot of people have reviewed it, so I'm going to sort of do a little bit of a slant on it about what my first experience was like watching the original Blade Runner and how that has changed my opinion of it and that kind of stuff. Now this is a movie that has been through various ups and downs and all over the place over the years. Not really going to be going into too much in the way of deep discussion of the plot. Everybody knows the movie, but what I'm more going to talk about is how it's kind of changed, and certainly what my feeling of it has been. First thing you're going to notice, though, is no unicorn sequence. Why is that? Well, because we're actually going to review the original theatrical cut of Blade Runner. Not going to be doing any of the director's cut or the international cut. I'm going to save those for another video and probably do 2049 at some point. But I wanted to describe what the original movie was like in its sort of warts and all perspective with the commentary, the whole 9 yards. So let's, I guess, get into that. Now, when I first found out about Blade Runner, I had a friend who was very big into Starlog magazine, and he had this issue. And I looked through it, and I'm like, whoa, this is pretty cool. Like, it's got a whole bunch of neat-looking futuristic city scenes in it. But I remember reading it and thinking, oh, this is from that Ridley Scott guy, isn't it? Now, I say that Ridley Scott guy in a slightly negative term because, remember, I'm young. I'm not even a teenager yet. And the only thing I knew Ridley Scott from was the Alien movie. And I thought, isn't that really, really frightening horror movie where people were like vomiting as they came out of the theater and stuff and people are shrieking? Okay, I don't like the kind of movies this guy makes. And now he's going to do the same with like people getting, I don't know, brutalized in the streets of a futuristic city? No, thank you. I'm not interested. But I kept flicking through this magazine, and in here, this is the article, it goes into some really, really cool information on what was involved in the making of the film, all that kind of stuff. You know, there's the print version, but I've got it scanned up here. Yeah, like, I just thought to myself, man, for such a probably scary movie, it's too bad that it's from a guy that does a lot of horror stuff. I would really have liked to have seen what this movie was going to be like. You know, I mean, like, look at the artwork and look at all the atmosphere, and the article goes into great detail about here's something that the genius of Alien is going to be now sort of taking and extrapolating into a huge futuristic film noir detective movie type of thing. Side note, I'm not going to go into great details of the plot in this. I'm also not going to discuss the whole Deckard being a replicant thing anymore. That is done in multiple videos now. So for anybody watching this for the first time, I've talked about Deckard being a replicant ad nauseum. Not going to touch on that. Going to touch on everything else in the movie at this point. So, thought to myself, right, well, cool looking futuristic city movie. That's really awesome. I wonder if it'll be any good. A lot of people like that Alien film. That's, I guess, an acquired taste. I wonder if this will do well or not. And alas, then the movie came out, and it did not get very good reviews. It did not get much success at the box office. And it was a restricted movie, so I couldn't get into it. But I just remember from afar thinking, oh, that's too bad. Well, I guess it makes sense. You know, not a lot of people want to see a scary movie, and he's done it again. So, yeah, I can see it not doing too well. There were a few reviews. Now, I couldn't find any copies of this. There is the Siskel and Ebert review, which I've actually used in my previous video. But there was one review that I will never forget when people were talking about what a bomb this was. And I don't recall who it was who said it. But whoever it was, it may have been Leonard Maltin, it may have been Gene Shalit. I'm leaning toward possibly it was Gene Shalit. I'll never forget one of the lines that they said is, This movie is so boring, even the main character falls asleep. And so, it's a bomb. I mean, it's boring. That boring. So I just thought, okay, I didn't miss much. It's this awful little, detective movie thing. We were sort of at that point in a lot of science fiction where big productions were sort of trying to capture the magic of other science fiction successful movies and not doing too well at it. And I just shoehorned Blade Runner into one of them. It's something that was reaching farther than it could actually achieve. And it's a dull movie. It's got this terrible voiceover. It's got all these bad scenes in it, and it doesn't really make that much sense. So I was just like, okay, fine. I'll bypass Blade Runner, and that'll be that. Then I was actually the very first time I ever saw it was a little bit weird. I was babysitting for some neighbors. Their kids are 8 or 9 years old. They'd gone to bed, and I thought to myself, what can I possibly watch? Now, these people had cable television, which was pretty cool. You remember these old switch boxes where you kind of flick the buttons? People of a certain age are never going to get this reference, but if you're my generation or older, you remember these things. The people that I was babysitting for, they had one of these old switch boxes. So I'd sit there, it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. What are on some of these extended channels? Because we only had like a dozen where I lived, but these people had dozens and dozens. It's like, ooh, you can watch sports from other parts of America. Cool. And one of the channels that was possible, although they didn't actually subscribe to it, was a new movie service called First Choice Super Channel. You could subscribe every month and you could get movies that were not yet out for video retail distribution. I mean, this is back in the day. I don't think you could buy too many movies, at least not for less than $100. You could rent them from the video store, but First Choice Super Channel was kind of aimed for these are movies that are not yet available to get on videotape. And there was one night I'm flicking through and I noticed, hey, they had Blade Runner on at like 11 o'clock at night. Let's check it out. Now, it's worth noting, it's all scrambled. It's not actually viewable per se. However, it's only inverted, and what I've done is I've reproduced what it kind of looked like when I was watching it. Now, this is a simulation. I've had to kind of go by memory and stuff. This isn't exactly what it looked like, but I will show you the first way I ever saw Blade Runner. So this is kind of how I saw Blade Runner for the very first time. I mean, you can kind of tell what's happening-ish. Well enough to follow the storyline. And not only that, to be impressed with the music, which Vangelis's music in Blade Runner is just chef's kiss. I know a lot of people love it. It doesn't get as much conversation as most other things, but man, oh man. And you could get a gist of the special effects that were going on, and I thought, holy crap, this is actually a really good-looking movie. And I first started to clue in, hey, you know what? Blade Runner isn't like Alien. It's not monsters. It's not, heads getting ripped off or what I had in my mind, the sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of a film. It's like, no, it's a detective show. He's around in a futuristic city. Okay, that's kind of neat. And it was the first time I kind of changed my opinion about Blade Runner. I was like, maybe it's not so bad after all, but it wasn't something I could readily get my hands on. And then through the advent of VHS and being able to rent a movie from your local video store and eventually being able to buy movies, I finally saw Blade Runner because I thought that music and the steamy bits of the video effects that I can make out in that weird inverted posterized version, I thought, I gotta see this. And I rented it and was like, oh wow. Now, what we're looking at here is actually a DVD. What I had back then was the videotape, so, bars on the side. But I was very impressed. I was like, wow, this is really, really good. Not great, though. Again, the voiceover, I had in my head, I had heard all those reviews saying, and then he had to go and talk with Bryant down at the police chief office. And I was just like, ugh. Every time the voiceover would come on, I was reminded of all those critics saying, this thing's a piece of garbage. So that didn't really impress me all that much. And then we got to that scene that I was showing earlier. The bit where we're back at Deckard's apartment. Rachel has saved him from Leon. Minor spoilers, but you all know the movie. And we get to the bit that I kind of found very jarring. Our main character falls asleep during the movie. Now, this whole sequence, probably people give it a free pass now. They don't really think too much about it, but this does not follow big Hollywood production pacing or plot or anything. It takes a lot of guts for a director to do a very quiet moment in the middle of a film. There's a couple of other films that have done this that actually really impressed me. When I saw this, especially the first time on videotape at home, I was just like, oh my God, this is the bit Gene Shalit, or whoever it was, talked about. Nothing is happening. This is a very dull moment of the film. And it is one of those bits that I'm very surprised not a lot of people really think about. Again, you probably have all come to Blade Runner after decades of appreciation. It's a cult classic. It's a pinnacle of science fiction film. But there's nothing happening in this sequence. And although I respect that Ridley Scott took a daring choice, it also comes across a little bit like maybe he didn't quite know what to do right now, and so there's this, just move around and we'll do some scenes and we'll film some stuff. There's a lot of lost footage from Blade Runner where they're trying out different sequences. Let's try this, let's try that. Let's see what happens with, playing around with stuff at J.F. Sebastian's house, that kind of thing. And this looks like, when I was watching it the first time, I remember thinking to myself, this is just padding. What's Ridley Scott thinking? Now, my opinion has changed about all that. I'm probably going to get a lot of heat from people right now, but when I saw this the first time, and all I had in my mind were those bad reviews, people saying, this is a terrible film, this kind of spoke to me as like a prime example of what's wrong with Blade Runner. Nothing's happening here. And this is also particularly how this sequence ends. This is a bit that will test the sensibility of a lot of women in the audience, because Deckard kind of forces this into a love relationship, where he's slamming the door and she's not allowed to leave and she has to kowtow to his advances. It's an uncomfortable scene that is not really appreciated by a lot of modern sensibilities, and I get that. I didn't like this sequence when I was a kid watching it for the first time, and I'm going to spare you it now. So we're toward the end of the film here, and I started to notice when I would watch it, there were all these elements, all these things that I was missing out the first time I had seen it. And by now, I think I had it on videotape, so I would just rewatch it at my leisure. Because there's like, the music is incredible. The bits that you see on the screen, all the kind of production design, I think the technical term is mise en scène, where you've got all the things that you're actually seeing on the screen. There's so much to look at. I would have to replay it and watch it over and over again to really grasp what I had missed on the first couple of viewings. And I started to turn around on Blade Runner. I'm like, you know what? This movie's got a lot of depth to it. Like, this is really, really cool. The bit at the end here with Roy Batty was probably what triggered for me and made me suddenly really love this film. I don't need to explain this to anybody, I'm sure, but like, that was for me the light bulb moment, because I thought to myself, all those moments will be lost like tears in the rain, and it's raining. He's crying. And it just suddenly opened up my life to like, oh, whoa, there is this Pandora's box of depth to this movie I had not anticipated. That scene, that line especially, was the moment for me. However, when I heard that bit with the tears in the rain, I just suddenly thought to myself, I gotta watch this again. There's a lot to this movie. Anyway, yes, the whole bit with Roy on the roof suddenly made me think, you know what, there are layers and details in this, in what's being presented on screen, that I just thought, I'm going to watch the heck out of this thing. And I have watched it over and over and over again, and I developed such an appreciation for it. But remember, my approach was from, it's not a very good movie, look at all the bad bits in it. Then I saw the videotape of it, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of bad bits in it. And then, I don't know, the Tears in the Rain line made me suddenly think, you know, this has got a lot to it. And it's just this deep, very multi-layered cake that you can dig right down deep into and just enjoy. So I now love Blade Runner. Now, as to the first film, which version is my favorite, I'm going to get into that in the next time I talk about the films. It's not the original theatrical cut, but I do feel that the original theatrical cut is almost like a foundation that is almost needed in order to watch and enjoy the other versions-ish. We'll get into that later. But I've talked ad nauseum about the original Blade Runner film. I do like it. I love it a lot. Those were the experiences that I had. This is how I came from like, oh, it's this terrible horror film that bombed in the box office, to, oh my God, it's got so much depth to it. Holy crap. It's also got a lot of flaws. I watched somebody review it a little while ago, just after 2049 came out. He had it summed up perfectly. He said, the original Blade Runner is a beautiful, messed up masterpiece. And he's right. There are so many things in this film that are just the pinnacle, the zenith, if you will, of what can be done in a science fiction film. And then there's some just god-awful mistakes just sitting right out there. I mean, the whole sixth replicant thing as well. We could get into that if you like. So, I'm going to stop there. But I hope you enjoyed this, me talking about the first Blade Runner film, the way it was originally released, and how I originally experienced it. My low kind of esteem for it then suddenly shot up through the stratosphere, and I love it. And I know there are people who haven't seen it. I really recommend you check out this film. Which version? I don't know. I don't know what I would recommend. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to be doing more Blade Runner off and on over the next little while. I'm going to talk the other film and the other versions of this. And until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole. Cue the happy ending.